Right, hello Year 8, I'm Mrs Whelan. Some of you may have seen me or met me, but I'm head of English, but I'm mostly over on the other side, so lots of you I won't have met just yet, so thank you all for coming. Got a real treat for you today. We've got Mr Robin Jarvis here. Now, when I was your age, which obviously was many, many years ago.
Thank you.
Sorry, it was about 20 years ago. And I was an avid fan of Mr Jarvis here, and he has written some amazing books, so things like the Whitby Witches and the Deptford Mice trilogy, and these amazing books that I still love. I remember being your age and coming and getting a book, get it signed, and listening to a reading. It was wonderful. So we wanted to kind of give you this opportunity to, an esteemed and, really well-regarded writer for children and young people, and has been compared to Stephen King for young people. Although I'm not sure if that's I don't know if that's a compliment or not, but certainly kind of very original writing, spooky, quite in modern context, sometimes using animals, sometimes, we've got sort of mythical and sort of lost artefacts being uncovered, and all these kind of exciting things that happen as a result of this. So I'm super, super excited today to introduce you to Mr. Robin Jarvis, and I hope you'll all make him really welcome. Oh my goodness. Whoa. That is cool.
Hello. Sort of not very quiet. You okay?
Yeah.
So, as you just heard, I write books for your sort of age and my sort of age, because this is the sort of thing I would have read, I would still read now. And I never liked the sort of boring books like Enid Blyton, because my sister, two sisters had Enid Blyton books, and you read one, you've read them all. It was a famous five, go and do this, and nobody dies. And famous five, the next book, go and do that, and not one of them gets killed. I always wanted Anne to die horribly, because when you read one of those, do you not think she deserves to die? I'm not going for an adventure, I want to stay home and make the tea. Die! So that's what if I was writing those, I would have had her killed in book 2. And the others would have had a bit of a party to get rid of her. Yeah. But so when I started writing, I thought, my books are not going to be like that. So I can kill off main characters. So you don't know when you're reading it. You go, oh yes, that's exciting, but how are they going to get to this? Oh, he's going to save them. Oh no, they just killed him. I think, what are you going to do now? So when I first started, the first book was the Deptford Mice. And it came out, and I knew what was going to happen. There's going to be 3 books. And I knew exactly where I was going in book 3 with it. And I'd go to a school and kids would say, my favourite character is so-and-so. And I'd go, because I knew so-and-so was going to copy to the end. And I knew there was going to be tears. So I was like, I look at angry letters from parents saying, my child has had nightmares. And I go, job done. It's always the parents who complain and never the kids, which is interesting. I did have a headmaster write a very snotty letter once. Well, the first Deptford Mice book. So we're not having it in our library, we're banning it because it's disgraceful. It's about rats and gods and living in the sewers, and it's got murder and death and violence. And I thought, well, yeah. And your problem is. And he said, well, we're banning it because my English teachers think it's revolting. I say he banned it from the school, so that just meant all the kids went and bought it. But yeah. Does anybody want to ask any questions as I'm rambling on about things? What sort of books do you like? What sort of books do you read? If anyone said Enid Blyton, I'll throw that window. Yes, I've read it, but just stop it.
I know some of you got some questions.
Come on, somebody be brave.
Come on, there's always, go on.
When you write books, what are the main things that you think a good story needs?
That's a good one. Okay, the scenario has got to be good, interesting setup with characters that you care about. You see, what I don't actually think I'm writing a scary horror book type thing. I think I'm writing a book about friends who go through an awful time. And so I've got to get those friendships right. So I create the characters. I love creating the characters. So there's the friends, and then there's the enemies and the monsters, and I really enjoy writing the monsters. So a book for me that I'm doing, if the monster's not good, then I won't want to do it. It's got to be a top-notch little monster. I mean, she's just a dead thing. You know, she was buried on the East Cliff Cemetery 400 years ago. But other monsters that have appeared in the Whitby books I've done include a fish demon, which went around and ate all the local cats, which was nice. Made a nice change. And a monstrous serpent that lies underneath the whole town. And other monsters from other books. There's, Punch and Judy. There are these creatures called Punchinello guards in one series, and they're about that high. And they look like Mr. Punch, and they talk like Mr. Punch, but they are evil, smelly, dirty, vile, vicious creatures who will just love to eat you and kill you. And I loved inventing those. So the monsters for me are a big, important thing to have in a book. But then you've got to weave a good story around having the heroes, if you like, and the monsters to make sure it's a good journey for both. Because you can't just have a monster go "Urgh." There's got to be a reason for it to go "Urgh," and make sure that the heroes really suffer on the way. Really, really suffer. I do like a good bit of suffering.
David, I think you had a question, didn't you?
How did you get interested in writing books and who were you inspired by?
Well, does anyone like drawing here? Is anyone good at drawing? Yes? Oh, quite a few. That's good. Because when I was your age, I could draw. I could still sort of draw. But that was the thing I could only do. I couldn't do anything. I can't do maths to this day. I look at some numbers and go, oh no, I don't want to do a sum. So I'm no good at science. I could draw, and so when I started writing, what I'd do is I'd draw the characters first. So I'd think, I'd do this little face. It was an interesting little face. I wondered who it was, and I'd write a little name down, or whatever species it was, and write about who they might be, and what they get up to, and what they like, and what they don't like, and who hates them, and that kind of thing, and how they might die. Got to think about that. And so that's how I started getting to the writing, because originally the first books were the mouse books I wrote. So I had a sketchbook filled with these little mouse faces, and if you had mice, then you could have rats. And when I was doing the little mice, I thought it was good to include my friends in that. So I could turn my friends into mice. And that was good because you could transplant the character traits of your friends onto these little mouse characters. So it made that character more interesting, more believable.
I was going to ask about that. How much do you use real people?
Oh, tons.
Loads.
Tons and tons. I'll hear something and it'll just filter through. Because you've got to keep your ears and eyes open all the time. You hear a little tiny bit of a conversation that'll just make you go, ooh. It'll just imagine the rest of it and what they were talking about or something. It'll give you a little jump off point to something more interesting. So, you don't know where you're going to get a good idea from. It just happens all the time. It's staggering sometimes where you do get the idea and the inspiration from. You don't expect it and suddenly you go, Someone had it, yes.
What inspired you to write about Whitby in particular?
Well, when I was at college, I went to college in Newcastle, and it was my birthday, and I was going to skylark. I said, where can I go special on my birthday? And a friend of mine, she said, have you ever been to Whitby? I said, no, I've never heard of it. And she said, we'll go there, and you'll like it. So I went, okay. So my birthday happened, and I got on the train. Two trains, I think it was. And it was a sort of a grey, sort of grim day. And I got off the train, and it was, it was, the Abbey was up there, and it was all interesting, and it was just fascinating. I thought, wow, what a great place. And I don't know, if you live here, then maybe you don't appreciate it as much as a visitor coming in seeing it for the first time, because you're just used to it. But for the first time, you go, whoa, look at this. I think you've got it, maybe if you move away and stay away for a while and you come back, you'll get that, oh, it is lovely. Because it is, you're so lucky to live here, basically. So lucky. And as I was walking around, you know, I'd get little ideas of, ooh, what happens in that yard, or what happens down those cobbles, or you know, over there, what's going on there, and the kind of pass, what's that. So you just get, I was getting sort of like ideas. I was just at college doing graphic design. I wasn't thinking about writing or anything like that in those days, but I couldn't not walk around and have ideas popping into my head. So that's why. And Whitby became linked with witches in my head because of there was a local radio program on. I was listening to a local radio. It was Halloween, and it was Radio Middlesbrough, and they had a white witch on doing taking phone calls, and she lived in Whitby, and so Whitby and witches got linked in my head. And eventually, when I started to write, I thought I did 3 mouse books, and then I thought, now I want to do something with people, and it was Whitby Witches, so that's why. And I did the first 3 Whitby Witches 20 years ago now. And then when I finished those, I thought I'd written all I can about Whitby. But ever since then, the odd little thing popped into my head. I thought, oh, I should have wrote about that. I hadn't done that bit. And in those days, the whole goth thing hadn't happened. You know, you have these huge goth weekends, and the steampunks and the goths and stuff. That wasn't happening in those days. And so I thought, oh, I missed that. I'd like to have written about that. So when I eventually came around to, I want to do more of those. What's coming in? When I thought I'd like to do some more books about Whitby, I had to include that. So the first book is called The Power of Dark There, and it's all about goths and steampunk people, and the town gets possessed. One half becomes all witchy and gothy, and the other half becomes all steampunk and gadgety, and they sort of have a battle at the end. I enjoy doing that. Any other questions?
How long does it take to write a book?
Well, it depends. Each book's different, you see. Some are long ones. This is quite a short one because some of them... see, that's quite a long one. That's one of the Punchinellos. But I was told to keep it quite short, so it's one of the shorter ones I've done. But even then, just because it's short, it doesn't really mean it takes a lot less time, because you're still coming up with the characters and the story and making sure it all works. So you're keeping it brief, but just as much work goes into it. So that was about 8 months from when you sit down and think, what am I going to write about, blah, blah, blah. And
Could you maybe say, how do you choose what to edit out? Because sometimes, you know, your teacher will give you back your work and say, right, that's your first draft, now you need to edit it. And that can be really hard. So how do you go about that process?
Well, I'm very lucky I have an editor. That's a good thing, yes. But after writing so many books now, I've done about 22 or something with it. I've got this built-in, I know what maybe doesn't need to be in there. But even then, sometimes I overwrite, because the one I've just finished number 2 of those, and I just got a little bit too long with it. So I tried to crunch it down as much as possible. I cut bits out, and I said I can't think of what else to cut out. So my trusty editor said, I will bring my machete and swing it around. So she's gone through it and said, well, we could get rid of that and that. And you know, that more or less says the same thing as that. So you whittle it down. But the bare bones of it is just there anyway. But it's quite difficult. But the thing is, you've got to remember the important thing is the story you want to tell, and tell it in the best way possible, and not get diverted into bits that you're not really sort of waffling on about. You don't do that. Just tell the story directly.
Was the fact that Dracula was based in Whitby the inspiration for this?
Well, I mean, you can't avoid the Dracula thing, because he's there. I mean, the first 3 Whitby Witches, we don't really talk about Dracula at all, but I think I've got to address it because it's like a fanged elephant in the room now. Because I invented my own little things called outwaders, which are little sort of supernatural gnome creatures this high, and they used to live under the cliffs. And I had fun writing about those instead of... I invented different villains as well, because I was trying to get away from the vampire thing. But now I've got to sort of address that Dracula was the big thing, and so book number 3 will be about the birth of the Dracula legend in its own Robin Jarvis-y type way, because it won't be quite... It'll be about how Dracula, how Bram Stoker was inspired to write Dracula by the events of whatever I'm writing about.
So how much research would go
Quite a
into?
lot, quite a lot. Because I don't want to get things wrong. I probably do, but it means more to me. I get more satisfaction getting things right. So I do have to really, and even if I don't put it in the book, the research I do just makes me feel more confident about doing the writing. So you can do a load of research and not use 9/10 of it. But that has helped you do the bits that you do. So, was that for me? You'll throw that on me. Thank you.
Someone else have a question? Come on, I know you have.
How do you plan how you're going to write the book? What kind of technique do you use?
Oh, that's a good one. Well, because I draw, I do the characters first, or I get a good monster, I think, okay, well, I put you in it, and you are such and such. So I get a good list of characters together, and then I say that writing a book is like going on a journey, and if you think about it, a journey needs a beginning and a destination with really good landmarks along the way to help you get there. So that, in book terms, that's the start, the ending, and all the really good juicy bits on the way. So you've got to have all of that in your head before you actually start writing it. So do a good plan. Otherwise you just end up going, I don't know what to write. You see, you should start off knowing what you're going to write, and maybe if you deviate a little bit, that's not that bad, because things can happen that surprise you, you're not expecting, but keep to the proper road that'll get you to the proper end that you want to. Because then everything that you write about will be directing you to that bit. So that's how I do it. I mean, I think other people do it differently, but it's the way I do it because it works for me. But the drawing does help for me. I couldn't do it if I didn't have a good visual sense. And when I'm writing, it's like I'm watching a movie. So the book, the story is happening, like this is a cinema screen projected on my head here. And as it's happening, I'm going, oh, that's happening there, and I'm just describing what's going on, and oh, they've come in, and oh, they've killed that person, so I'll write that down. So if you can imagine it as a movie, because movies are great ways of finding out tension and suspense, and you know, because the way a good film gets you all scared and keyed up is you don't actually see anything, because it's like the really good horror films are the bits that don't show you much. It's all about suggestion and shadows, and so if you can build all that suggestion into the writing, instead of saying, and there he was, and all his guts fell out, that's not very frightening, you know, it's just like, but if you can really suggest the horror of it and the scariness of it and the tension and the suspense, that's always a good thing. People go,
Oh, Tyler.
hello.
What inspired you to start writing books?
Well, I just had a load of sketches of these mice, and a friend of mine said, "What were these for?" And I said, "I just did them because I enjoyed doing these drawings of mice, and that one's you." And you should have written a story about those. At the time, I didn't think I could write a story. I just thought I could draw the pictures. But I sat down and I thought, okay, I'll come up with a story about these things, and I drew the rats as well, and some of the people I knew I made into rats. I didn't tell them. And the rats ate the mice if they found them, they peeled them alive, and that kind of thing. And I came up with a storyline, and I sent that off, and a publisher said they liked it. So I just sat down and started writing, and here I am 25 years later or whatever, 20 odd books later. So that was my way into it. Other people have different ways into writing. But if you really want to do it, I think you will just end up doing it. So if that's what you want to do, just plug away at it.
I mean, obviously sometimes these guys will get asked to write something that they find hard or difficult, and sometimes they might get feedback from us as teachers that might be quite hard. So which of the books that you've written was the hardest? And sort of secondary to that, you know, is there a time where you've had reviews either from an editor or whatever that's been hard to hear, and how do you deal with that when you get a bit of...
I think I've been quite lucky, because usually the editor and me that we're both on the same sort of page sort of thing. We know what we both want out of it. And if the only notes I get are can we cut this bit down, or there was one of the Dancing Jacks, we wanted it, the editor suggested one more chapter, a bit more of a scary bit just here. I said, okay, that's fine, so I'll put an extra underneath it. So I've been quite lucky, you see. We've never really disagreed about anything. That was good. Touch wood. Or Formica, what it happens to be.
Yeah.
No, so I suppose it is difficult if you don't get on with the editor, but I have been lucky.
Yeah.
I mean, if an editor has a totally different idea of what they want from the book, then maybe it's the wrong editor, or maybe they shouldn't have commissioned the book in the first place. I don't think I've never really heard of it happening that way. I suppose it does happen. But you've got to really enjoy writing the book anyway, otherwise it's gonna translate when the reader is reading. You're gonna if you're not enjoying writing it, it's not going to be enjoyable reading. So I always have to really get myself stuck in. So, and I write at night as well, so it's the best time for me for some reason. I write till about 5 in the morning, so at night I'll be there, and I'll have a little lantern lit next to me, and I'll put some appropriate music on, earphones. So if it's a scary bit, I'll put frightening music on. And as it's a really frightening bit, I have to be stood right next to the person it's happening to, so I can feel exactly what's going on. If they're terrified, I've got to work myself into a state to be really, really frightened, and you do end up, you know, you can really do that. You can really. Have you ever really frightened yourself? If you sit, maybe, or you know, you haven't in the daytime. If you think about what is frightening, you know, something behind there. And if you really let your imagination go, you could wet your pants. You could really frighten yourself. So I do work myself up, and that is just great for the writing, because you can think about how it feels to be scared and describe it, and so that comes through on the page. Or if it's a sad bit, then I play sad music, and I can end up with tears coming down my face, and I'm really sad when someone's died. So you just got to really live it as you write it. It just makes it better for everybody. Hello.
What tips would you give us when we're writing stories?
Enjoy it. Don't write a story that you don't want to do. Because the stories when I was at your age, which is a long time ago, the only bit of the English lesson I really enjoyed was the creative writing bit. I can't do anything the other bits, the comprehensions and the letter writing and all that kind of thing. I'm not technical. I'm more of the creative bit. It's like that's all I wanted to do. So, but I only wanted to write the sort of stories that I wanted to write. I didn't want to write. You know, if you get given a subject and it sounds a bit dry, I always try to find a way of twisting it around to make it a subject that I could. I mean, someone give me a boring sort of subject title now for a story. Well, think of a boring thing. Go on.
Math forever.
Math.
Forever.
Maths forever. Oh God. Yeah. Okay. Because that would be my idea of hell. So I would have that as a vision of hell, and I'd write a story about a vision of hell. And it'd be maths forever. So that would be my way around a boring subject. So if you're going to write, try and make it fun for you. Because there's no point in writing something if you're bored. Because the reader's going to be bored. So make yourself really enjoy the writing. So change the subject a little bit, if you can get away with it, and find ways of getting around the boring bits, and just make it really exciting for yourself. And really, don't do a bit here and a bit there. Just try and have a marathon session at it, so you've got it all, a big creative flood going on, and you can just really go to town and go, yes! And hurt your fingers as you're typing, you know. Because that's great. It's so satisfying just getting a whole load of pages done. And it's so, you just feel so good after it. You know, it's like, I suppose if I was a runner, it would be like doing a marathon or something. You'd have that same sort of exhilaration. But for me, getting a good, exciting chapter done is like, yes! Yes! And they all died horribly. Yes. So that's what I would advise, just make it interesting for yourself, because there's no point otherwise, you know.
What type of books did you read when you were our age?
Well, you see, I would have read the sort of books I write, but there weren't that many of those when I was your age. Because fantasy is a relatively recent sort of phenomenon. What we had was, obviously, the Enid Blytons. But we had, like, adventure books for boys, which they weren't very good either. We had Tolkien. I liked Lord of the Rings. I thought The Hobbit was baby, so I didn't enjoy that. So there wasn't a lot of it. Weirstone of Brisingamen, I forgot about that. Yeah, that was a good one. Because again, like me in the Whitby area, Alan Garner, who wrote The Weirdstone of Brisingamen, set it in the place that he loved, which is Alderley Edge in Cheshire, and he filled that with the Arthurian legends and had kids interact with the wizard and the knights and elves and dwarves and things. And that was going on alongside the real world, and the real world didn't know it was happening, and so that was a big inspiration for me. And that's what I liked when I was writing the Whitby Witches, was having the real world going on and them not knowing that the fishy folk lived there, the Alfwaders, and there were evil monsters living underneath and that kind of thing. So I like that possibility of weird stuff happening and you not knowing about it. I like that. So that was my sort of inspiration. And of course, not to write a boring book like The Famous Five. That would be my idea of how it's working. Famous Five do maths, that would be good.
Deacon, I think you have the question, don't you, that you're wanting to ask?
What inspired you to write about the supernatural?
Well, my mum and dad were quite strange, I suppose. They used to let me stay up and watch horror films late when I was quite young. So by the time I was 10, I'd watched all the old Universal Frankensteins and Werewolves and Mummies and Dracula and Hammer House of Horror and all that kind of thing. And they used to buy me, and it's quite strange, I don't know why, but every Christmas I'd get an encyclopedia of black magic and supernatural stuff, which I loved, but I don't know why they did it. I mean, you know, they were just ordinary people, but they obviously saw in me a love of weird magic and stuff. So I'd get these wonderful books, and I'd read them from cover to cover and find out all about strange, primitive and pagan stuff that happens around the world, and these strange librarians who do magic in their spare time. And that did sort of colour my view of life, having a magical thing going on alongside a reality, I suppose. So I've always loved the supernatural, because there's nothing more basic and primitive and just, you know, what's out there in the darkness. I love that sort of anything is out there. When the darkness settles and or the fog comes in and there's no moon, anything could be out there. Or it could just start scratching at the window or something like that. I love the possibilities that are there.
So were your family very supportive of you?
Yeah. I mean, I was the baby of the family. There were four of us, and I was the baby, so I suppose I sort of was allowed to drift off in my own head, because I prefer living in my own head to living in the real world. So I always like, because fantasy in your head is better than reality. Reality lets you down, but you can make a better life in your head. For me, it's so. I'm as a complete control freak as I am, you know, I can control the world I create. I am Lord. I am God. I can kill. I can create, and I can enjoy that much better than the real world, where I'm nobody. It's better. Yeah. But I've always loved that. Puzzled, Hammer films and Universe. There's never been a better Frankenstein than the original black and white one. I mean, that was just terrifying. Where he lifts up. Have you seen the old black and white Frankenstein? Oh, you're missing out. It's probably on YouTube right now. But Boris Karloff, fantastic makeup. And he doesn't actually say anything, I don't think, in the first. He's just going, ah. And he escapes from his cave, obviously. He's staggering around the countryside. And there's this little girl, this little farmer's daughter or something. She's only about 6. And she's pulling flowers and letting them float on the lake. And he's there, and he stumbles up to him. Ah! And she goes, and she gives him a flower and shows him what she's doing. Because the monster, he's an innocent, really. He's been abused by the hunchback servant, and people are scared of what he looks like and stuff. And it's the first time someone's not been scared of him, 'cause it's too little to know the difference. And he picks up the flower and he floats it on the water and goes, oh. And he gets another flower and goes, oh. And then he runs out of flowers. So he picks her up and sees she floats. Oops.
What did you say? What did you say?
You're right.
No, she doesn't float.
Oh.
No. The next time you see her father is carrying her soggy body into town, and that's why all the villagers go, let's go and get the monster. But I mean, it's a great film, and it's so old it's not got any soundtrack. There's no incidental music, but it doesn't really need it because the visuals are so good. I mean, that it's all very expressionistic, big shadows and huge sweeping sets. It's stunning.
Is there a book? Sometimes we have some things with our boys, and they're not always the keen readers. But is there a book that kind of made you cry? Is there that book that kind of stands out for you?
A book that made me cry.
Other than obviously the famous 5 in kind of horror.
Oh, that was crying tears of boredom. That one. And injustice that Anne's staying alive so long. I knew the dog never got shot for worrying sheep, which is
Is that Timmy?
Timmy the dog.
Yeah. They had good feasts though, didn't they?
Yeah, that's what it was. It was just let's go and have bags of lettuce, and beer, and you think, oh come on, let's get to some murders for God's sake. I mean, they were messing with spies and smugglers, and not one of them wanted to do them in.
No.
It was just like very disappointing. The book that made me cry. Not really. I think movies made me cry, but not books. I think when I'm writing, I do make myself cry, but I can't think. I think it's quite sad. There was a bit in Lord of the Rings at the end of it. So quite when Sam sees everybody off and goes home. I thought that was quite sad. But not. Can't think of. But I do like to be moved in all ways, you know. When you're reading, because reading's such a great place to be, because it's better than a movie, because the special effects are better, because it's all in your own head, and you actually, it's the perfect, totally immersive experience, because it's happening around you, and you're there with them, and you experience their highs, their lows, their tragedies, and that is just, you can't beat that. I can't think. There must have been something that made me cry, but I can't think of it now. Yes.
Why do you have a head?
Why do I have a head?
I was noticing one.
You see. The proper answer to that is why don't I have a head? Everybody should have a head. 2 heads better than 1. No, this is because this is in this new book. She's called Scoresby, and she's a witch who lived in the 17th century, and she was only about 17 when she died. She doesn't look that young now, but she's been in the ground for a long time. And I'll do a bit of a reading later where she pops up. But she's buried on the East Cliff, not even in the cemetery really, because she was a witch, and they didn't bury witches in consecrated ground. And since she died, she's been festering with hate and bitterness because she fell in love with they didn't call them scientists in those days, they call them natural philosophers. And he was also a magician as well. She fell in love, and he was a nobleman. She was the local ragged witch, and he was a nobleman. He was called Melchior Pike. And he was inventing something amazing. And she fell in love with him, and she thought he loved her. But she found out, or she thought she found out, that he was actually just using her so he could finish his big invention. And she betrayed her best friends to help him finish his invention, because she was head over heels in love. And when she felt betrayed, then this huge feud happened, and it carried on beyond their deaths. And that's why the whole town gets possessed. She possesses that side, and he possesses this side, and they continue their feud in your heads. You get possessed by him, and you start inventing weird things, and you hate the people who live on that side, and they get all witchy, and they try and bewitch you and all that kind of thing. So that's why I got her. It's always nice to make, when I'm writing, to make a thing from the book and carry it around, and people can see. Because I made, for the Whitby Witches, originally, I made a fish demon. He was about that big. And he was rubbery with realistic claws and eyes. And I had to have him in my bag, and I'd whip him out and go, ha ha ha! And he was great, but the thing with latex is, after a while it starts to rot, and he gets brittle and crispy, so you can only bring them out for a few years, and they have to be retired and stay at home. He's currently residing under a glass dome, falling to bits. But he was very good at scaring the next door's cats. Well, she had too many of them. She was also offered 2 and didn't get them seen to, if you know what I mean. And they had kittens, and they had kittens. And then they all played in her garden. And the local Toms used to come and sit on the wall and use it like a harem. And so you'd see, and there was one particularly ugly cat. We called it the fathead cat, because it was the most disgustingly ugly cat. Its head was like this, it was a big body, but its head was just a bucket with these heavy lidded eyes, and you could see him just staring at her. And then, a month or so later, you see these little baby versions of him running around. You go, oh, baby fathead. And I made the mistake once of feeding those cats from one of my windows, and every time I opened that window, all the faces would appear. I said, oh, God. And so I made this fish demon, and when I opened that window, I would go, okay. You don't want to know what I've got for you today. I go, no! And then let it go. But she was very strange. She became known as sort of local Catwoman, although she didn't look like Michelle Pfeiffer in any way at all. And she'd go around and she'd pick up cats, roadkill. And they weren't hers, but she'd bring them home and bury them anyway. And there was one cat that she had which had been knocked by a car, so its back legs had gone. And it could only drag itself round on its front legs, and it lived under a settee. And every now and again, I went round there once, and it would, suddenly you'd see this thing go across the room. And all the other cats lived in her kitchen cupboards. And she had 3 young kids, and they were always coming down with some strange medieval ailment, like glue ear or something. It was bizarre. Yeah. How did I talk about that? Why did I talk about that?
Missing that.
I don't know.
Maybe we can all do take
Yeah.
back.
Anybody want to know anything?
Maybe if we have one more question, and then maybe we're going to do a bit of writing, and Mr. Jarvis will come round, and maybe if you've got some questions you're a bit too shy to ask in front of everyone, you could ask him some questions then. I mean, the one thing I just maybe to finish off our questioning I've put down is, if you could sort of tell, I saw you 25 years ago.
Thank you.
So, if you could tell kind of your younger writing self anything, or any kind of advice, what would it be?
Be a plumber.
That's what my dad says to me frequently.
No, because I've enjoyed it, so I've got no regrets or anything. No, I think you've got to learn as you go along anyway, by yourself, your own mistakes, and I can't think of anything I'd tell myself. I'd maybe don't eat so much chocolate, would be a good idea. He says, having just been to a chocolate shop and bought a load. I have as well. No, I haven't got any. Write faster, perhaps. Yes. Don't mess about with the internet, write faster. When they invent the internet, don't go on it. Don't go on Wikipedia. Don't get lost in a Wikipedia spiral finding about things you'll never want to know about.
That's good advice.
Yes, but you do that. You click on that and you click on that, and then you end up thinking about things you've never ever heard of before. No use. I wouldn't have listened to my advice anyway, really. No. See, I'm not a very good team player. So I'm not very good at taking other people's advice. As I say, I'm a control freak, and I want to do my own thing, man. So now I've got to find my own way and learn from the mistakes I make, which obviously are many in Legion, but I learn and take from that. So no, I wouldn't know what to say to myself.
Thank you. Round of applause for Mr. Jarvis.